The real horrors next to our homes are supposed to be our sanctuaries, the one place we feel truly safe. But what happens when that feeling shatters? What happens when the things that go bump in the night aren't just in movies, but are standing right outside your window, or worse, inside your house? Get ready, because these stories prove that the most terrifying things often happen in the most unexpected places, and sometimes the call is coming from inside the house, or right next door. It was a quiet winter night, snow muffling the world. Outside, I was alone, curled up in the sunroom, bathed in the soft glow of the TV. This little room, usually a cozy spot for movies, felt suddenly different. It had a door leading straight to the side driveway, and though the blinds were drawn tight, a prickle of unease began to surface. Then, out of the blue, the motion-sensing light outside flared to life. It shouldn't have, nothing big enough to trigger it was usually out there, especially not in the dead of winter. My heart gave a little jump. Lowering the TV volume, I strained to listen. Silence. The light was still on, a harsh, unwelcome glare. I peeked through the blinds, just a tiny slit. Nothing. The driveway was empty, snow undisturbed. The light eventually timed out, plunging the area back into darkness. I tried to brush it off, maybe a gust of wind, a stray branch, though honestly it didn't quite feel right. Just to be sure, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach, I pulled on my shoes and walked around the driveway fast. Clear. Absolutely. Nothing there. Okay, deep breath. It was just a fluke. I went back inside, settling in to resume my movie night, trying to shake off the strange feeling. Some time passed, maybe an hour or so, when the quiet was abruptly shattered by a distinct crash from outside, like a bucket full of tools or something heavy tipping over. And then, just seconds later, the motion lights snapped back on. This time, the unease vanished, replaced by pure, cold dread. This wasn't an animal. Someone or something was definitely out there. The thought sent a jolt of panic through me. I wanted to get up, lock doors, do something, but a paralyzing fear rooted me to the couch. From where I sat, I was hidden from the side door by the furniture. It was the only blind spot. The terrifying thought struck me, if I moved, I might walk right into whatever was outside. My eyes darted to the blinds on the side door. They were fully closed, offering a flimsy barrier against the night, but I wasn't looking at the blinds. I was looking through them. Etched against the dim light from the street was a shape, a human shape, a perfect outline of a person standing on the other side, arms held slightly out from their body. My blood ran cold. It was unmistakable. The physical sensation hit me like a wave, an intense, sickening clench in my heart and stomach, my breath catching in my throat. I felt lightheaded with terror. With trembling legs, I pushed myself up from the couch as silently as I could, inching towards the dining room door, the one leading away from the sunroom. But before I could even reach it, the person outside started. Knocking, not a polite knock, aggressive, rapid pounding directly on the glass of the sunroom door. I needed to make noise, to scare them away. "I'm calling the DMN cops." I yelled, my voice shaky and small, but loud enough. I froze by the dining room doorway, listening. The banging stopped. Silence for just a second. Then I saw it. The shadow beyond the blinds shifted, moving away from the window and towards the doorframe itself. My heart hammered. I braced myself, and then, in the narrow gap between the blinds and the doorframe, I saw her, an old woman with wild, weary hair, eyes wide and unsettling. For a fleeting second, seeing she was just an old woman, I felt a strange, misplaced sense of relief that vanished instantly as she began slamming her open hands against the glass of the door, her face contorted, screaming something I couldn't make out, a sound that was pure, unfiltered rage. She seemed completely unhinged. Pure instinct took over. I slammed the interior door shut, putting a solid barrier between myself and the terrifying scene, and fumbled for my phone, dialing 911, reporting a crazy, seemingly mental old woman trying to break into my house. They told me to find a secure, locked room and stay there, maybe with a weapon. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door. My mind raced, every nightmare I'd ever had about a break-in flooding my thoughts. And then the sound, a loud, violent Crash from the direction of the living room, glass shattering. She was inside. Silence followed, an agonizing silence punctuated only by the frantic pounding of my own heart after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute. I cautiously unlocked and opened the bathroom door. I peered into the living room, and there she was, the same old woman with the wild hair, standing right in the middle of the room, in front of the now broken window. She saw me the time the door creaked open. Her eyes locked onto mine, and she lunged towards me, rushing the bathroom door. I screamed, a raw, 17-year-old scream of pure terror, and slammed the door shut again, locking it frantically. She at once started pounding on the bathroom door, relentless, wouldn't stop. I could hear her muttering things under her breath on the other side, but the words were a jumbled mess, lost in the sound of her fists against the wood and my own panicked sobs. I begged her to go away, but the pounding continued. Finally, I heard it a loud bang at the front door. The police were here. I wrenched open the small bathroom window and screamed for help. 2 officers appeared below the window. I begged them to crawl through the broken window in the living room, explaining. She was inside. They assured me they were okay. They'll handle it. The pounding on the bathroom door stopped. A sudden commotion erupted downstairs. I heard the police officers yelling, sharp, commanding voices telling the woman to step away. When I finally dared to open the bathroom door and step out, the 2 cops had the woman detained. She looked at me, her eyes holding a look of pure, unblended crazy, and I fast looked away, a shiver running down my spine. It turned out she lived nearby with a woman who rarely left the house. The old woman, they explained, had significant mental health issues and required specialized care. My parents did press charges against the younger woman, believing her failure as a supposed caretaker contributed to the terrifying break-in. While they didn't win the lawsuit, the crazy old woman was, thankfully, moved out of the neighborhood and placed in a treatment center. But the image of that face, the sound of the glass breaking, and the terror of being hunted in my own home, that stays with you. Changing gears completely, let's talk about a different kind of fear, the slow burned red that creeps in when logic fails you entirely. My second story takes place in a small house I own on a large, isolated property in rural New York. I go up there a few times a year, mostly in winter for skiing. There's one neighbor right next door, separated by a fence, whom I'd never even spoken to on the other sides. Just miles and miles of silent woods. Another neighbor lives further down the road, across the street, and I'd actually met him a few times because we shared a love for skiing. This past January, I headed up for the first time that season. As I walked towards the front door, I heard it clear as day, coming from the direction of the neighbor's house, a child laughing. It was news to me. I hadn't known they had. Kids stepping inside the house, which sits empty most of the year, always feels a bit strange. It takes time to bring it back to life, turning on the water, the heat, everything. That first night, after the long drive, I slept like a log, utterly exhausted. The next morning, after breakfast and getting into my ski gear, I went outside. And there it was, sitting in the snow on my front lawn, a big, bright red ball. It hadn't been there yesterday, must belong to the neighbors, I figured. Simple mistake. I picked it up, walked to the fence, and tossed it over into their yard. Problem solved. I drove off to meet my friends at the ski lodge, spent the day enjoying the slopes. When I got back after dark, tired but content, I'd already eaten dinner with my friends, so I was ready to crash. Walking up to my front door, I saw it again. The big red ball, sitting right there on my front lawn in the exact same spot. Okay, that was odd. Maybe it rolled back. I tossed it over the fence again, a little more forcefully this time, and went inside, trying not to think too much about it. I woke up in the middle of that night, not slowly, suddenly, to the sound of children laughing outside. It was late. Maybe 2 or 3 a.m. kids playing outside at this hour in the freezing snow. It made no sense. Creeping to the window, I peered out. I couldn't see any kids. The laughter had stopped, but I could see something else, something sitting on my front lawn, squinting from the window. I couldn't quite make it out. Driven by a mix of fear and confusion, I pulled on my robe and slippers and stepped out into the biting cold snow, and there it was, the red ball, sitting in the same spot for the third time. A shiver, colder than the night air, ran down my spine. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. This time I didn't throw it back over the fence. I picked up the cold, damp ball, carried it inside the house, and placed it in the living room. I went back to bed, and for the rest of the night there was no more laughter. The next morning, before heading out to ski again, I decided I had to talk to the neighbor. I walked over, knocked on his door, and finally introduced myself. To my surprise, he was an elderly man, seemingly gentle and completely unassuming. I asked him about the child's laughter I'd been hearing and the red ball that kept ending up on my lawn. His response sent another wave of chills through me. He told me, quite simply, that there were no kids around here. He lived alone. Thanking him, I shook his hand, the mystery deepening and becoming infinitely more unsettling. I left the red ball sitting in the living room where I'd put it and drove back up the mountain for another day of skiing, trying to push the weirdness. To the back of my mind, that night, I returned to the house completely exhausted, ready for the long drive home the next day. I dumped my stuff on the couch, planning to pack in the morning, and practically collapsed into bed, my body aching. I fell asleep instantly, but I woke up again to the sound of children laughing outside. Again, I practically launched myself. Out of bed, adrenaline flooding my system, and scrambled to the window. My eyes right away found it, the red ball sitting in the snow again. But how? I had brought it inside, panic seizing me. I ran to the living room, flipping on every light, tearing the place apart looking for the ball I knew I'd left there. It was gone. The red ball I had brought inside was gone, and somehow it was back outside in the snow. That's when the realization hit me like a physical blow. I was not alone in the house. The feeling was overwhelming, suffocating. I turned on every single light in the entire house. Heart pounding, I in a panic shoved all my wet ski gear in too. A bag ready to bolt if things went south. I double-checked every door and window. Locked. They were all locked. How did it get out? It made no sense. Leaving every light blazing except for the ones in my bedroom, I crept back and looked out the window again. And there, far behind the red ball sitting in the snow, I saw it clearly this time, what looked like a kid, standing. Perfectly still, just standing there, looking towards my window. I ducked down at once, my breath held tight, and fast closed the blinds on that window, then every other window in the house. I tried to logic my way through it, tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was just tired. I lay there for what? Felt like an eternity, a full, terrifying hour, before sheer exhaustion finally wrestled my fear into submission, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I skipped breakfast, packed the car faster than I ever had, and sped the hell away from there, not daring to look back at the red ball still sitting on the lawn. Nothing was stolen from the house that trip, which, in a twisted way, was a relief, but the core mystery remains. How did that ball get taken out of my locked house? And that child's laughter, it still echoes. But the most terrifying image, the one that haunts me most, is seeing that solitary figure, that child, standing out there in the cold, silent snow in the middle of the night. Because of that ball being moved from inside to outside, I just don't know what to think anymore. Finally, let's talk about the terror that can literally move in next door. My roommate George and I met through work. We lived just 15 minutes from the office and carpool daily. Everything was normal until recently. About 2 weeks ago, a new neighbor moved in next door. We didn't see them unpacking, didn't even see who they were initially, a man, a woman, how many people. Just boxes and activity we couldn't observe clearly. Naturally, on the third day, George and I decided to do the neighborly thing and introduce ourselves. We walked over and knocked on the door. No answer, which was strange, because his car was clearly in the driveway. We figured maybe he just couldn't come to the door right then for some reason. As we turned to walk back down his driveway, George stopped dead, grabbing my arm and whispering urgently, "Look at the window next to the front door." I looked. There was a distinct kink in the blinds, and behind it the unmistakable outline of a man holding the blind up just enough. Two peer through the gap, staring right at us. Like a total creep, George and I exchanged a look, a shared, sudden understanding that this was both incredibly awkward and deeply unsettling. Okay, first impression. Not great, we agreed right then he wasn't going to be the best neighbor. That night, around 1 in the morning, noises started coming from outside. It's warm where we live year-round, so the windows are usually open. The sounds were loud, disruptive. I went to my window upstairs, which overlooks the neighbor's backyard where the noise was coming from, and I saw him, a big guy, wearing a hoodie with the hood up, which was weird given it was like 72 degrees outside, and he was sawing a large piece of wood in the middle of the night. It was a bizarre, ridiculous scene. I went to knock on George's door. Turns out he was already awake, equally annoyed by the noise. He had to get up early for work, and this guy's late-night lumber project was nuts. It went on and on. We agreed to go over and just politely ask him to stop. Since he was outside, we knocked on his gate instead of his door. The second we knocked, the sawing stopped dead. We expected the gate to open, him to come out and talk. It never did. Complete silence from their yard. At least the sawing stopped, though, defeated and creeped out, we went back inside, hoping. That was the end of it. It wasn't until a few nights later that the noises started up again in the middle of the night. I woke up confused by the sound. It took a few seconds for my groggy brain to register, but as I got to the window, the sounds became horrifyingly clear. Screams, they seemed to be coming from inside the house next door. And I saw the neighbor in his backyard again. He was hurrying towards his house, dragging something heavy behind him. I couldn't quite tell what it was in the dark. Then he stopped and looked up, right at my window. He saw me, the time I realized. He'd spotted me. I pulled back from the window, adrenaline surging. I ran to George's door, banging on it. He was already awake, just listening. He grabbed his phone and right away called the police, reporting the screams and suspicious activity. I stood right by his door, listening, my heart pounding. Then a loud slam from downstairs. Our back door. We looked at each other, pure horror on our faces. The neighbor wasn't just being weird anymore. He had just entered our house. George yelled into the phone, telling the dispatcher the man was now inside their home and to send help right away. He hung up. There was no lock on George's bedroom door. We had to barricade it. We pushed with all our might against the door, moving a heavy dresser in front of it, praying it would hold if he tried to get in. We heard footsteps coming up the stairs, fast, heavy. They stopped for a second at the bathroom door, which creaked open. Then the steps moved fast, deliberately towards George's door. He was coming. We pushed as hard as we could against the door as the man tried to push it open from the other side. He rammed against it, then started hitting it with something blunt, a heavy, thudding sound against the wood. This was exactly why we hadn't tried to confront him downstairs. We had no idea what he was armed with, but our makeshift barricade held. He couldn't get through the door. After a tense few minutes of struggling, we heard him go back downstairs. Silence returned, thick and heavy with fear. A few agonizing minutes passed. We cautiously decided to open the door, just a crack, to peek out. The hallway was empty. Then, suddenly, we heard a man shout downstairs, "Police! Drop your weapon!" A deep, commanding voice. George and I ran downstairs, relief washing over us, expecting to see officers, but there were no police there. My eyes scanned the room in a panic, and I saw him hiding behind our dining room table. It was the neighbor. Run. Upstairs. I screamed to George. The man hiding behind the table lunged out and chased us up the stairs. This time we ran for the bathroom, the only room with a lock on the door. We slammed it shut and locked it, panting, backs against the door. We weren't in there for long. Before we heard it again, a shout from downstairs, "Police! Hands where I can see them!" This time it sounded like the real deal. The banging on the bathroom door stopped. Silence upstairs. Up here. We're up here. George and I screamed, voices hoarse. 2 police officers came rushing up the stairs, guns drawn, yelling at the man to drop his weapon. We heard the distinct clatter of a knife hitting the floor. When the police told us it was safe to come out, we did. They brought him out to the police car in cuffs and put him in the back seat. We told the officers about the screams and suspicious dragging we'd witnessed and urged them to check his house. With guns drawn, they entered the neighbor's house just as another police car pulled up, fast followed by two more. Seconds later, we watched in shock as officers emerged from the neighbor's front door with a woman crying hysterically. She had been locked in his basement and had been screaming for help, pressed against the door, and in the bag the neighbor had been dragging in the backyard, there was a dead body. We didn't find out the whole story behind who this woman was or who the dead body was, but we're pretty sure the man was going to jail for life. The house is now back up for rent and we're just hoping somebody normal moves in. These stories aren't fiction. They are raw, terrifying glimpses into the potential darkness that can exist right beside us, hidden behind ordinary walls and closed doors. They are stark reminders that sometimes the most chilling horrors aren't found in distant, abandoned places, but are waiting, unseen, in the quiet anonymity of your own neighborhood. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How well do you really know the people living just feet away?